Deafrowe with Deafrowe TV, and I'm back again with another review. And this time we're going to start on something completely new. But it's going to be another six-part miniseries called Jekyll from 2007. Before I get started on this first episode, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Hit that notification bell so you can see episodes 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 that come up next after this first episode. So let's get started on episode 1 of Jekyll, starring none other than James Nesbitt with the creator Stephen Moffat. One of my favorite shows from the early 2000s, well, mid 2000s, really. This is 2007, obviously, and one of my favorite Moffat uh, shows as well. He went on to do the Sherlock series as well, but this was before the Sherlock series, I believe. And this focused mainly on James Nesbitt's character of Jekyll and Hyde. And at the very beginning of the show, right here, you see Jekyll, which is in this case his name is Dr. Tom Jackman, which is played by James Nesbitt, is talking to his secretary that he is hiring to work for him in his other persona, which at the moment doesn't have a name in this TV show. Uh, and it's crazy how James Nesbitt is able to change his mannerisms, his facial expressions, and all these other things to make himself almost look completely like a different person when he transforms into Hyde. Um, as you can see here, this is Catherine Raymer. I mean, that's the character's name. It is played by Michelle Ryan. And she plays like this. She's like a psychologist that has been hired by Dr. Tom Jackman to analyze Dr. Jackman and his other self to figure out how they could maybe coexist together, help him investigate his condition and that kind of thing. Basically, like being all around confidant, trying to figure out how this all began, or help him figure out how to control it somewhat. And this is the first time that she is meeting Dr. Tom Jackman, and he's trying to explain things to her as he's going through the routine that he has set up for Hyde and himself to share the body. And basically, what he said, he's got a GPS that they're supposed to keep on him, so he knows everywhere he goes. He keeps it on him, so Hyde knows where he goes. They keep a little dictaphone, recorder on him at all times, so he knows, like, hey, I've been here today, right here today, whatever. And it is an agreement they made between each other in order to coexist at the moment. And Doctor Jackman tells her, he's stronger, more agile, meaner, the whole 9 yards. Don't underestimate anything he says, and all this kind of ordeal. And since this is the first time, this is kind of she is going to be kind of the surprise when he transforms into Hyde. He decides to strap himself down to this chair that he has like a little code to that only he knows the code to, but she knows the code as well to let him get out of the chair when he turns to Hyde. And she says, other than trying to surprise Hyde with something, what else do you use this chair for? And he goes on to tell her, the chair I sometimes use as a way to punish him when he does something he wasn't supposed to do. It keeps him strapped down. And of course, and that's about the time he changes, and then blah blah blah. Anyway, let's keep going here. So now we cut back to Dr. Jackman. We see him transforming into Hyde here, and then it cuts back to Dr. Jackman going to visit his wife and kids. Uh, Claire Jackman, which is the character's name here, is played by Jean Bellman. or Gina Bellman. Um, yeah, Gina Bellman, and she's upset because he has pretty much like isolated himself away from the family for reasons unknown. She thinks he's having an affair and shows him like all these photos and stuff that she's had like a private detective pretty much following him around to see what he's up to. And the reason she tells him this is because you just left with no reason. You didn't tell me why you're doing this. And he's just kind of looking at her. He has this deadpan look on his face, like he doesn't have a lot of expression. Um, Almost like he's like a husk. And she doesn't, she loves him, but at the same time, she like wishes he would like be alive, show more emotion, open up to her about. And she even goes so far as to say, for the first time ever, when I had the two kids and you were happy that these two babies that I had, she's like, well, maybe you really do like me. She's like, that's just how subtle you are about your emotions and everything. And so he's kind of worried that she could end up seeing something that he doesn't want her to see. The main thing he's worried about is like he sees these photos. He looks at the back of it, gets the name of the person that's taking the photos, the investigator. And I think what he's thinking at this time is like, there's got to be more photos. It can't be just of him, because he knows that somebody's been following him around this whole time. Then they've also seen Hyde as well, his other persona. And he goes on to tell her, it's like, so that's what that black van was for. It was been following me around. It's kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, really. And she's like, well, we didn't really discuss what type of van they want to follow you around in, but yeah, it could be them. So on the way back to his little hideaway that he keeps hiding, he starts to transform unscheduled, and so he pulls off to the side in this little barn so he can safely transform into Hyde. Then he wakes up the next day in a basically a whorehouse and pays the prostitute off, and then goes on his way back to the apartment where he's holed in. And he comes back as Dr. Jackman. Dr. Jackman's talking to her. She's like, he tells her, tells Catherine's like, I don't drink whiskey. She's like, no, but he does, and I don't know which one's going to come through that door. And so he's trying to figure things out. And he's looking for like rare books on rare diseases and that kind of thing. And she's like telling him, I found some of the books you were looking for. And she's like, you're not supposed to be looking for a cure or whatever. And he's like, no, but I still need to understand what's going on. And so he heads to the Klein and Utterson Institute, which has a huge library of some sort. Where he ends up meeting an old colleague that he used to work with, and the colleague is trying to get him to come back to work with him. And the colleague's like, I haven't even advertised your job. I want you to come back. And he's like, no, you can't. I can't do that. Anyway, back here. So he's talking to Catherine here, and Catherine's got him the address of the private investigator that took all the pictures. And he decides to push his luck a little bit because the time's coming up for him to change. But he decides to push his luck a little bit and try to get to the private investigators before he changes into Hyde. And he does make it to her. And the private investigator here is played by Mira Sal, and the character's name is Miranda, along with the blonde haired girl, which is Fenella Woolgar, who's playing the character of Min. So you got Miranda and Min, who are the private investigators. And she's telling him, it's like, yeah, at first we thought you were just doing like some weird makeup job and all this other stuff, but we could tell there was a physical difference between the person that went in and the person that went out of the building. Your hairline receded back further. You gained about 2 inches in height, and you looked like you were, your posture was different. You were stronger and everything else. So we knew something was different. And she goes on to say, "Here are the rest of the pictures." Hands them, the rest of the stuff. And like, I don't want any of it. I was paid pretty much to come off this case, a very large lump sum of money. And so they're close. He comes into their little building as they're closing it down, like they're going out of business. They made so much money from this deal to stop investigating him that they could pretty much like retire. And so she tries to run away from him and catches her outside. And he had, you know, was saying like, "Oh, I know y'all following me around because I see the black van everywhere." And then as she's passing by, she's like, "By the way, we don't have a black van." And then he realizes the private investigators aren't the ones following him this whole time. It's some other thing. And so he sees the black van and tries to stop it in the middle of the road, and it doesn't work. Obviously, he tries to chase it down, doesn't work. He ends up coming across this punk in the alleyway who decides to pull a knife on him. Well, right about this time, that's when Hyde decides to come out, and he gets the recorder out and says, "Use minimum, do not kill him," blah blah blah, and yeah, he's basically like trying to tell the tape recorder to give, basically to give Hyde a message saying, "Hey, don't kill this boy." Minimum necessary force. And then, bada bing, bada boom, he turns into Hyde. And like all the way, oh my god, the way that James Nesbitt can pull this off. Just his facial expressions, the way he carries himself, the whole 9 yards is just completely different. It makes him look like a completely different person. Really, the only thing I can see that there's maybe a little bit of makeup done to his face, and he has contact lenses in to make his eyes look a little bit wider and different. And of course, there's like a little bit of a thing going on with the teeth in certain part as well. But other than that, it's all James Nesbitt's acting that makes him look so completely different. And that's one of the things I love about this show. It's got a mix of horror and a mix of mystery to it because you're trying to figure out like why is this Dr. Tom Jackman becoming Jekyll and Hyde? Why is he conflicted with this thing? And as you can see, Hyde is completely different. The way he walks, the hairline is different. And almost, I mean, in some manners, his jaw is almost longer in the way that he's carrying his face. It's crazy how he's able to do that. So he starts to mess around with the kid, and the kid is spooked. Like the kid had no worries whatsoever about Doctor Tom Jackman, but as soon as this guy arrives on the scene and has all the confidence of 1,000 people on his shoulder right here, he's not sure what to do with him, and it's spooking the kid and the girl out. And so he starts to play. He's like, "I'll give you three choices. Give you three chances with that knife to come after me." And of course, he misses all three times, and then he proceeds to just mess with the kid. And at first, you think he snaps his neck and kills him, but he doesn't. Uh, and he likes the name Billy, and decides to start calling himself Billy. And towards right here, you think Billy's dead, and he's messing with the girl, talking about lions and then lionesses and all this other stuff. And here's the thing with the teeth right here. The fact is, Billy, I have a nice side. So you see here that he didn't kill Billy, as so it shows that Tom Jackman does have somewhat of a little bit of control over Hyde and what he does, and so Hyde decides to go on a binger pretty much and starts drinking as much alcohol as he can get his hands on at the nearest bar here. It was funny little. It's like my liver applied for a transplant. I mean, he has some of the best little one-liners in this whole thing when he's Hyde, and it's the way he delivers them too that's so funny. So he's trying to hook up with this girl in the bar, and they're in the back trying to get it on, I guess you could say. And he's interrupted by the barman, and the barman says, "Mr. Hyde, somebody's out here to see you." And so, "Who's Mr. Hyde?" He says, "Apparently you, me." And so he decides to go out there and meet the guy who's calling him Mr. Hyde. It's none other than Benjamin Lennox, which is played by Patterson Joseph, aka, as should know him from the last series I just reviewed, Front Neverwhere, the Marquis de Carabas. He's back. But anyways, Patterson Joseph playing Benjamin Lennox, and he's trying to explain to Mr. Hyde, or yeah, so you're not, you don't even know who you are, and I can tell you everything about you, and we own you, and all this other stuff, and you know, Mr. Hyde's not too happy about the way he's coming across, but he's being very calm at the moment, and he tells Lennox, Benjamin, it's like I'm going to put you outside that little window right there, and then it's like you see this guy behind you, Christopher, the bodyguard, which is played by Al Ashton. He said he wouldn't like it if you try to put me out that window. And of course, this doesn't phase Mr. Hyde whatsoever. He's trying to explain to Mr. Hyde who he is. Like you've had movies made about you, you've had books and all this other stuff. He's like, yeah, you've been played by, and he goes through like a list of actors who has played who he is, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The whole thing. So he goes on to tell him like Spencer Tracy, Michael Caine, even Jack Palance played Jekyll and Hyde. And Mr. Hyde's not, intrigued by any of this really. He's like, I'm just wanting to get on with my time in this body today. And the smile on his face here, where he's telling the bodyguard could actually do anything to him. And Mr. Hyde's like, yeah, that bodyguard's not going to do anything to me. And so, it was so funny after he tells him, like, this bodyguard's not going to let you throw me out that window. So he throws the. Uh, yeah, as soon as Benjamin tells you I'm your owner, he's like, I don't think Christopher will fit through that little window that you're going to talk about throwing me out. And he throws Christopher out the little window. And then, of course, he walks out the door and leaves the two behind. And he's amazed that he could throw Christopher out the window. Like they don't realize how strong he actually is. And then you see him climbing up the side of this building right here across the street with ease. And then he shows back up at the apartment where they're supposed to be hiding out at with Dr. Tom Jackman and Catherine Raymer. And yeah, it's kind of spooky what happens in the apartment. At one point, apparently, and this happens both ways, by the way. At some point, when he passes out from all the alcohol he drinks, Hyde, when Hyde is asleep and dreaming, uh, Dr. Tom Jackman can come back into the body and take over control. And he kind of does that and kind of like knocks on her doors, like, "Is everything okay?" Blah, blah, blah. And he goes and lays down. And so the next day she gets up and realizes Dr. Jackman is awake this time. And she's trying to give him details in the Hyde's life, and he's kind of like pushing it to the side, not really wanting to discuss it. He just thinks that this other side's a monster, and that's all he is a monster. And she tries to explain to him he's much more like a kid than a monster. He doesn't know what to do with what he's got. Um, and then he's surprised that he has like these Disney songs on CD that he likes to listen to, and she's trying to explain to him he likes the song. He's like, "My dark side likes Mary Poppins." No wonder I was bullied in school. And it goes to show he doesn't. He just wants to fix the problem. It's a problem that needs to be fixed. He doesn't really want to acknowledge this other side exists, other than having to put up with it. Anyway, he gets the home address. Catherine Raymer finds the home address of the private investigators, and then Dr. Tom Jackman goes to track him down and finds Min in town in her little orange S2000, which is a nice looking car, by the way. And Min knocks on his window and says, "Hey, you gonna follow me?" "You can't follow me if you're asleep." And he was asleep at the wheel when she found him there. Because they do want to talk to him, but they couldn't talk to him while they were in town and being followed around by that black van, which is the company that it belongs to the company that paid off the private investigators to stop looking into him. And so that's why that's why they pretty much retired and closed the business down, because all the money they gave them, and it was so much money, it was ridiculous. And then she goes to show him the other photos that she didn't give his wife, and she says, "The reason I didn't give it to your wife is because this doesn't even look like you, and if you look real close, it's not you. The hairline's different. You gained about 2 inches in height and all this other stuff. Your posture and everything's just completely different. And then we knew it couldn't be you. Something else was going on." And then when we started getting calls from this corporation wanting to buy us out and tell us to stop looking, we knew we were on to something. And so she started looking into it more and realizing who Dr. Jackman really is. And takes Dr. Jackman out to her investigation shed, I guess you could say, where she's gathered all this information about him, and realizes that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the book, was based on a real person that Robert Louis Stevenson had really known, but had passed away at the age of like 47, which is, or 43. I can't remember. See what exact age he was. But he shows him a picture of the person that the book is based off of, and it looks just like Dr. Tom Jackman. And he says, "This is not possible." Okay, yeah. So at the age of 43, he passes away while he was transformed in the Hyde. But he didn't have any known relatives or any known siblings or any known offspring. But at the same time, Dr. Tom Jackman is an orphan. He doesn't know who his family is or who his parents were, because he was raised in an orphanage. And so, yeah, as they're telling him all this, he's talking about the family and all this other stuff. It's like you had twins, uh, and she's telling him that this original uh, Dr. Jekyll, or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, had no brothers, no sisters, no surviving cousins, nobody, and somehow here you are, just out of the blue, and then you have two kids of your own and the wife and everything else. And as she's talking to him, standing in front of the projector right here, he gets really quiet. And then he goes, "What's the address? What's my address?" And then she realizes, "Oh shit, he's 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 fallen asleep at this moment while they're talking, and turned into Mr. Hyde." And Mr. Hyde, upon finding out that he has a family, see, there's one thing that Dr. Jackman was trying to keep away from his other side, and that was the whole reason of holding up in that apartment and doing all that to keep away from his wife and two children. He didn't want Mr. Hyde to know about it in case he decided to do something to him. Well, he decides to go visit them, and right away, either the wife at first thinks it's her husband, but then she realizes, like, no, you're different. Are you a relative of some sort? And he's like, yes. He just goes on to say he's a cousin of sorts. And I was just passing through, wanting to visit. Anyway, and they're just talking and talking, and actually, Mr. Hyde is very reserved in this respect. He has no intentions of killing, because in my opinion, Mr. Hyde sees these as his offspring just as much as Dr. Tom Jackman sees it as his offspring. And so, yeah, that goes on, and then they cut back to Benjamin Lennox here, who's talking over the phone to his boss. We don't know who the boss is at this point, and he tells his boss, it's like, I tried talking to Hyde, I couldn't do nothing with him, and the boss is like, well, Hyde is an animal, you wouldn't get anywhere with him. And well, it's like, what do we do next? Well, now we bring in Dr. Jackman, and then the person over the phone's like, can we can bring him in? How soon? And see, at this point, Dr. Jackman has woken up back in the car, and he has a note from Mr. Hyde in the car saying, you won't be needing this anymore. And it's basically talking about the envelope with the ring in it. Because he was hiding the ring every time he transformed, so Mr. Hyde wouldn't know he was married and had kids. And so he runs back to the house. He's going through the house and everything. And they're cutting back and forth between Dr. Jackman and Benjamin here talking to his boss. And Benjamin's trying to tell the boss, is like, we can't just pull him off the streets. This is England. It's the third world country with rights. Now, one could argue these days it doesn't even have fucking rights. So, that's one of those one-liners I like to see. Is like, we can't just pull them off the streets. This is England. It's a third world country with rights. And then, and basically the boss is saying Tom Jackman won't have rights for long, because whoever the boss is over the phone. She or he is saying to Benjamin, like, Mr. Hyde's going to slip up and kill somebody. And he's going to do something that is not going to be, cannot be taken back. And as Tom Jackman's going through the house and sees all the chaos and all the toys everywhere and everything, he's thinking the worst right now. He's thinking Mr. Hyde has killed his two kids and his wife. And he's making his way up to his kids, and he pats his kids on the shoulder as they're in the bed, and they both wake up and hug him, and he realizes everybody's alive. And the wife comes in and says, yeah, your cousin was here and kept the kids up most of the night playing with all the toys. It was chaos. Like, and it's almost like the psychiatrist was right. The psychiatrist was trying to tell Dr. Jackman that Mr. Hyde's more like a kid than he is an adult. And the fact that he realizes he's got two kids of his own, he's probably going to be more ecstatic about it than Dr. Jackman is, really. And so, yeah, he gets on the dictaphone, and he's like, Mr. Hyde's like, you really think I would do anything? But I will say this: I will get more time in the body, and eventually I will take over the lion and the lioness. He brings that back up again. Anyway, so then Dr. Jackman answers the phone. It's the detective. Now you think like when he turned into Mr. Hyde and attacked these two private investigators, you would think that he was going to kill them, but like I said, Mr. Hyde's more reserved than they give him credit for, and he just locks him up in the cellar and leaves him behind, and then gets the address and goes to. And at this point, Mr. Dr. Tom Jackman, he's freaking out because he's like, I really did not want him to know about my family and all this stuff, and now he wants to take over. But now he gets on the dictaphone and starts to send a message back. So when he transforms again, he's like, "This is not your family. We will go to war with each other if you try to fight me over my family." He's like, "If you don't abide by the rules that has worked and we have survived, we will go to war. You come to my family again, and we are at war." Basically, he's like, he's going to be at war with his other self at this point if you try to come back at him again. Like he's Doctor Tom Jackman at this point pretty much snaps because he doesn't want to. He's not really embracing this other side of him. He doesn't want to. I mean, why would you want to? So yeah, so you see all the characters being played right here. So yeah, that's the first episode. That's how the first episode ends. It ends with Hyde finding out that is married and has two kids, and Dr. Tom Jackman is finding out more about his past and where he might have come from, being that he's an orphan, and uh, and that's the mystery aspect of it, is trying to connect him with that ancestor that looks just like him. He has to be related in some way, but he doesn't know exactly how at this point. But seeing that picture and seeing how he looks exactly like the guy in the picture, there's some way or some form or fashion he has inherited that curse. But how? Like, how did he come to be alive and as a person that inherited that curse from the other person? You know, the one that the book is based off of. And then that whole this corporate group that's coming after him as well, that's wanting to take him in. What is their interest in it, and how is it they know so much about him and everything else? So you get a little snippet of what they, you know, he tells them like, we pretty much own you, and like, oh, is it because they're the ones that own the patent on the formula that makes them do this? You know, that type deal. What is it exactly? So more questions than answers in the first episode, but it's kind of cool. That's what I like about it. This horror mystery called Jekyll from 2007. And that is my first episode review of Jekyll from 2007. And this is me, Deafrowe, out.